Welcome to Mastering Midlife. If you're in your 40s and 50s and asking yourself, what happened? You're driven to succeed but concerned about the effects in your work, career and relationships. You're worried for a close friend or family member you suspect may be close to burnout. Then this podcast is for you. Your host, top-selling author and executive coach Mark J. Silverman has direct and meaningful conversations with world-leading experts in business, finance, health and well-being. Midlife is a time of extraordinary changes and challenges, but you can excel in your career while improving and strengthening your life to achieve sustainable and true success without compromise. Now here's your host, Mark J. Silverman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Mastering Midlife with your host, Mark Silverman. That would be me. We talk about how to thrive when the world asks the most of you. Today, I've asked my friend, a teacher, one of my coaches, Diana Bonnici, who's way out in Hawaii, so we're hoping that the Wi-Fi is going to hold for us, 8,000 miles away, to talk about grief. My mother recently passed, and I was talking to Diana about some of the things that were going on in my life. And she said, "Oh, that's grief." And I said, "Oh, I don't feel grief." And she said, "Well, grief shows up in different ways." So when we started talking about that, I thought this would be a really good topic for the podcast. And then Diana said, "It actually, grief pertains to just what we're talking about, midlife, because there is loss in entering into this next phase of our lives." So Diana, first would you just share your background of why you spend so much time in these topics?
Well, I think grief is anytime we experience an emotional loss, whether it be good or bad, we feel grief and we don't acknowledge our feelings. In our society, grief is, oh, you can grieve for 3 days and it's over. And I think many people end up feeling like they're going crazy. I'm thinking too much of it. I don't know how to do it. And this gives permission for people to feel and to understand the process that's going on.
Great. So the thing that I got out of the conversation was just because I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel depressed. I didn't think I was going through grief, right? I thought I was relieved because caring for an elderly mother or caring for an elderly father was so tough. I felt free a little bit. And then you pointed out some symptoms, and then you showed me the grief wheel. So if you would tell me how you brought me into that. You can hold up your grief wheel and we can talk about that, but I will also put that in the notes. So look into the notes of this podcast or the video, and you'll be able to download this grief wheel so that you can follow along. So why don't you start there?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that the grief wheel is not, I'm going to go through shock, protest, disorganization, and reorganization. I'll explain that later, but it's not a linear process. It's like you don't finish with one. It's like it's a spiral and you go around, and everyone grieves differently. Some are relieved, but they are grieving the ideal of what didn't happen. Some people, especially in midlife, they're starting.
So I had a tough relationship with my mother. Right. And that's where you caught me there. So explain that. I had a tough relationship with my mother. I didn't think I was grieving so badly.
Right. Well, and what you look at is what you're missing is what you didn't have, what you missed either as a child or, it's even people wanting to get a divorce and they're divorcing someone. They go through a grief process, even if they're relieved. It's like, wow, why am I crying and why am I going through these feelings when this is exactly what I wanted? I wanted to be free. And with midlife, it's interesting because it's what I call the end zone. It sounds funny, but you realize you're not going to live as long as you've already lived.
So even though we have 40 or 50 yards to go, we're still in the end zone.
Yeah. So many times midlife starts looking at, well, is this what I want to do when I grow up? Or is this how I want to have a relationship? And so what happens is when you start looking at those questions, there becomes grief that I'm not getting what I want, or grief I'm not where I want. I thought by 45 I'd have a mansion and be rich. So there's a lot of inward looking to say, I'm sad because I'm not living what I want to live. And people don't recognize that as grief.
No.
And grief can be small. I lost a piece of jewelry. It can be large. My child is leaving home. I say that's large for me because I cried for a lot when my kids ended up not eating dinner.
And my children in the process of going off and doing that. So just back to real quick, you said that, grief when we're in midlife and life isn't going the way we thought we're not where we thought we wanted to be.
Right. That's
actually grief. And the way I experience it when I talk to my contemporaries is they get angry with themselves. They put themselves down and they don't. And this gives me another thought about if this is grief, we're not even dealing with what's really going on if we're dealing with the beating ourselves up.
Yes, but I'm going to start. I'm going to bring this in. Can you see that?
I can see it perfectly. If you're on the podcast, remember to download the grief.
And
wheel.
I'm going to try to explain it real clearly. This is actually a grief wheel. And there's 4 sections. Picture a circle and it's divided into 4. The first one is shock. The second is protest. The third is disorganization. And the fourth is reorganization. And again, it's not that, I went through shock, now I'm in protest and I'm going to stay. It's like every moment you can be in a different place. And so shock is when, my gosh, I realize I'm unhappy, or I realize my mother died. I didn't realize my mother died. And there's a shock, there's a numb, there's a air for brains. We can't think clearly. And
which was the piece that you got me on, because I wasn't feeling grief, but I couldn't seem to get things done.
Right.
And I was forgetting things. I was dropping, and I'm just getting out of that. So that's interesting.
Well, I had one client, she actually put her keys in the freezer. She couldn't find them anywhere. The brain is not going on all 4 cylinders because there's something going on in the background.
Okay.
And so this is the phase that, again, we need to be very gentle with ourselves. And people need to realize that everyone does grief in a different way. For you, it may be, I'm not sad that she died. I'm actually a little relieved, but I'm still feeling off. I can't think. When someone dies, it may be, again, that you're missing what you didn't have, but it also may be celebrating what you did. And so it's like feeling the numbness of that. I can't believe this is real. The next part of protest, the next quarter, is called protest. And when you talked about the anger, it's searching for answers. Why isn't this working? What did I do wrong? Self-criticism, guilt. There's a lot of feelings that seem to go on, increased of feelings and emotions. And there may be a very deep tiredness because you're looking inside of, what am I doing? I'm angry. And especially even with suicide, the anger at the person, but then it gets turned into anger at yourself of what didn't I do?
And so every single thing that you're describing is what happened with me. I was exhausted and I didn't know why. I could not get out of my own way. I was forgetful. And then I was angry at myself for not being a bigger guy, the better guy, just constantly.
Yeah. And there's also the protest and the anger at self-criticism. I'm not grieving enough. Or if I'm not crying all the time. Again, you can laugh one moment and cry the next. Or what's the matter with me? She died and I'm not, I'm laughing, and many times people grieve before the person dies, or you're grieving a relationship for a while before you even speak it. So sometimes when people feel like I'm done with this relationship, they've done a lot of the internal work of already leaving by the time they say I'm leaving.
Yes.
So the person that leaves feels relief, and the person that's left is feeling like, my God, where did this come from? I didn't know.
Got it. The other part of the disorganization and of the part that you talked. Oh wait, you're moving into disorganization. I'm rushing you. Great.
No, that's okay.
I'm so excited with what you taught me. I just want everybody to hear it.
Yeah. Well, the disorganization is very interesting. It's about anxiety or feeling off or feeling depressed and feeling like you can't think straight. There's a feeling of anxiety, like something's wrong, and there's a missing, or you're sensing the presence of someone, but it's more, you don't want to really socialize. grief can be very isolating because people don't know what to say. Number one.
Right.
Number two is they think you've been grieving for too long. You get 3 days in our society to grieve and you're supposed to be over it.
Right.
So there's a whole anxiety of despair and anxiousness that comes to the disorganization. You feel separate, like where do I belong? Especially if you're looking at life goals and you're thinking, I'm not happy with where I'm at, but I don't know where I want to be. So there's a feeling, the midlife feeling of the midlife crisis, they call it, is like, oh my gosh, I have to go outside of myself to do something so I feel good. But really,
can you slow that down for me? So
yeah.
what happens is where, we wake up and we decide, oh my gosh, I'm not where I wanted to be. Now, what do I need to do? And then we go into we go into disorganization with that.
Well, first you go into shock. It's almost like the realization is, oh shoot, this isn't working for me.
Right.
I'm not happy. The second is, what did I do wrong? I never do enough. The third would be disorganization. It's like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know. I can't take the risk. I've got a family. I've got responsibility.
Thank you.
So the disorganization is where you don't know what you're going to do. And when someone dies, the disorganization is that person isn't in my life anymore. Or if a friend, midlife, more contemporaries die. And as you get older, it gets even worse. But it's like looking at when your friend dies and you're thinking, what am I doing? Where's my life? And so this grief wheel is really important because it allows you to look at what's going on in your life.
Right.
So we did shock, protest, disorganization.
I'm going to slow you down on disorganization one more time because it was really helpful to me. I was caring for my mother. She was the center of my life. When my dad died, he was the center of my life because we were caring for him. And then when she died, all of a sudden this space opened up in my psyche, in my world, in my pocket, in every way. Yes. And then I started thinking about my son is going on a trip abroad for 6 months. And he's been home with my ex-wife, and we've been caring for him all this time. And now he's going. Now after the shock and the protest and all that stuff, now the disorganization of all this free time. I'm no longer dad all the time. Now I'm just Mark again. Now how do I do that? So this is really, really good. Thank you.
And along with that, the idea whether you live with your mom or not, she was always on your mind.
Always.
Or always worried about what's going on. So in a way, and that's midlife also requires people of that age to take care of their parents often. So if your life is consumed with that, whether you're physically doing it or emotionally, when they die, there is a void. What do I do now? It's like, okay, now that I'm not spending 40 hours a week thinking about them, what do I want? Yeah.
Got it.
And the next is reorganization. That's the fourth quadrant. It's like a pie, right? And reorganization is where we try something new. We say, okay, what is it I want to do? You try maybe meeting different people. Some people say, I'm leaving this relationship, or I need to change my career, or my children are gone. Now what do I do? Many relationships go through crisis when this time occurs because it's been set up in a way that energy is going to children. The children have grown up and left. Now what do we have?
So so you said the word crisis, but I want to make sure, where does the voice inside says something needs to change, something's happening. Where does the crisis happen in this wheel? Does it happen in a specific place? Is it in the reorganization? Like I've decided the solution is I'm going to get divorced, or the solution is I'm going to change my job.
Nobody knows. It's almost like this is the individual journey. I'd like to say is when you get in disorganization.
I was trying to get a formula out of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the reorganization is when you start trying on new ways of behavior, or you start thinking, what could I do different? Usually it's like, what do I need to do to fill this time? What would make me happy? Do I want new friends? Will a new car do it? No, but some people try that, So it's like looking and saying, what can I try that's new and different? Now, as I said, sometimes you'll be in reorganization and you flip to protest. One of the ladies I know, she was walking in a mall and she smelled the cigar of her husband and she just burst out crying. And this was 2 years later.
Wow.
So you think that, oh, I'm finished with grief. I don't think you ever finish with grief. I think that it lessens. You know, in the beginning, it's a 10. It consumes you. And as you go through the process and allow yourself to feel and experience, what you end up doing is you learn how to do it differently, right? And so everyone has their own timetable. Some people say, oh, it's a year. Well, the first year is sometimes hardest because you go through different holidays and stuff.
Triggers to bring it back.
Triggers. But at the same time, it's not just the triggers. It's like looking at, how do I want to do this differently? You know, how do I want to live this in a different way? And so the first year is maybe the hardest in a way, but it could take years. I've had people come in that have been grieving for years because it was the love of their life, or their children died, or there was a suicide. And it's allowing, or sometimes it's, I really want to do something different and I'm stuck. I really can't change my life because of my obligations, because of who I am. So this grief wheel is allowing yourself to feel all those emotions and to allow yourself time to feel them.
So that is 90% of the people who I work with. They want a change. So they're in midlife. They've made a certain amount of money. They have a family. They have all these responsibilities. And a life coach would say, what do you want to do? What are your dreams? And my people would say, I have elderly parents. I have college to pay for. I am not going to weave baskets on the side of the road. Yeah. So then what do you say if someone feels trapped by the responsibilities that they built for what they thought they wanted? And it probably still is what they want. They still want their family. They still want all those things, but then now they want something else. So they have to grieve. They have to grieve and be in that bind there. Where would you go with them?
Well, I think it's really about owning that this is what I'm feeling. You know, acknowledging to yourself, I'm really unhappy. This isn't what I'd signed up for. I really didn't want to take care of my elderly parents once my children left, or someone gets sick or hurt and can't travel. That happens a lot. And so it's like, once you acknowledge that you're working with this process, you have different choices. You know, maybe you can't get a new job, but maybe you can have a new relationship with your spouse, or, you know, what I mean is bring life to it. Maybe you volunteer. Maybe you start looking at different ways that sometimes people, I'll say to them, your job is so that you can do your passion. So being able to do your job does not mean you can't do your passion, but you may not do it in exactly the same way as your mind thinks. Grieving is really a healing process. People have a hard time to see that it's a healing process or that it's transformative. Many people try to stuff it away. If I don't think about it, it will go away. Or it's been a month now, I should be over. When am I going to get over this? The truth is, we don't know. It's
a lot faster if we allow it and feel it and experience.
Yes. And it's a lot faster if some of the tools that I use for people is do some writing. You know, what didn't you get to say to the person that you really wanted to say? Or what is, you know, write it down and then burn it, or write it down and make a ritual of it, you know? Or what is it I'm missing? You know, what is it I want from my life? And if I start writing down what I want for my life, I'm getting clearer about what I need and where I want to move with my life. So it's taking the time to feel. And to acknowledge, I'm not going crazy. I've had so many people in grief say, I'm going crazy. You know, I cry in the middle of the mall. I don't know where I'm going. I drive somewhere and I'm lost. And it's not that they're getting dementia. It's just that they're in so much grief still, right? And so if we give ourselves time to feel, it's like eating well, being in nature, and also being able to have people that we can talk with. You know, if we have one friend or a therapist or a coach that can help us process what's going on. Many people in our society they don't know what to say when someone's grieving, even if it's a close friend. And they get tired of hearing the same thing. So
the best one is, oh, it was for the best, or God must have had a plan, or something like that. It's like, oh God,
And so as a friend, what you do is you listen. You support. But sometimes it's important to have a life coach or someone that's going to really be able to have you process not just the death, but perhaps the whole relationship.
Yeah.
To understand what is it that went on with my mother.
Let the baggage be buried with the person.
It doesn't happen that way. That you think it's going to go away, but it doesn't.
So question. So you're grieving. Something happened, and you're grieving a marriage. You're grieving someone dying, and people don't know what to say. As the person grieving, what tools do you have? How can you train people to talk to you? Do you give your people something to say to the people who come in and just say the wrong thing?
Well, most of the time, I ask them to choose someone in their life that they feel comfortable sharing with. And again, it may be a life coach because they don't have anyone that can really listen to feelings. And most people don't want to hear a lot about feelings, right? So, but it may be, it's like if they say something, I hear that's a suggestion, but that's not how I feel. It's like acknowledging that that's a suggestion or thank you for, just say thank you. The truth is the people, their intention is not to hurt you. Their intention is to help you.
Right.
So if they say, oh, it's for the best, they were in suffering, thank you. It's like, I don't need to say, well, for me, it's not, or yeah, it's a real relief. I'm glad they're gone.
Right.
Because people put their expectations of their grieving process on you. Oh, she didn't cry enough, or she's still grieving, or she's happy. It's like, how can she be having a drink and playing, But remembering that these triggers, there's lots of triggers. It may be holidays. It may be smells. It may be thoughts. And it's like when you have a friend that you can say, if it's a close friend, you can say, you know what, that didn't help me. It's not, you're stupid for saying that. It's like, it didn't really help me hearing that. And maybe we could reframe it.
That is a very good tool. So some of the things that I took out of what you had to say was, first, if you're going through midlife, if you lose a pen or a piece of jewelry, if someone dies, you're going to go through grief, no matter how small or how big, you're going to go through grief. The second is to be kind to yourself and allow yourself. This is not the time for you to be the one who kicks your own butt to get yourself into gear. Maybe you have to get yourself up and go out to work, but you be kind and gentle with yourself. The other I hear is experience your feelings, experience what's going on, and just allow it. The next thing is find someone that you can talk to, that you trust. And if there's not someone that you can trust and you can talk to, often a paid professional who knows how to listen and just reflect back is kind of worth the money and worth the investment. And then writing is, for me, I believe that pencil and paper are the greatest gifts God has given to man besides dogs, right?
Yeah.
If I'm on a desert island, I either want a dog or I want an endless supply of pen and paper, right? What did I miss in the summary?
It seems like just people understanding that wherever they are in the grief wheel, whatever they're feeling is okay. That who you are in this process is individually yours. It's your process. And worrying about what other people think or other people's vision of yourself, of what you should be doing, is not, if this is your process. And it can take you as long as it takes you. And I guarantee it does get easier, not easier in that it goes away, but it doesn't hold you down so much. It doesn't consume your life. It becomes, oh my gosh, today I didn't think about them. So it's allowing the process to play its way out. But again, this really being able to think about what you're feeling and allowing the time to do that. And taking the time to do the processing to know what your reorganization is going to be. And do it by choices, not by default.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so very, very useful. So for those who don't know, if I wasn't clear in the beginning, Diana is a licensed marriage family therapist. Probably the best relationship coach I have ever met in my life. Where can people find you?
PracticeLiving.com.
One word, PracticeLiving.com.
Yeah.
And I will put that in the notes.
Yeah. And I do worldwide counseling, and I do Zoom, and I do phone, and I do in-person and live coaching. And I love what I do. And I'm really blessed to share in people's lives that way. And it's just
You're in Hawaii, so if you can, fly to go see Diana every week. But if not, Zoom or Skype is just as effective. Diana, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and for teaching us with your brilliance.
Thank you very much for having me.
And as a friend and a teacher.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Mastering Midlife. If you like the episode, please share it. Please tell your friends. I think grief is really important for people to understand. Like us on Facebook, like us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and we will see you next time. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.
And review. To hear more from Mark and be the first to find out about new shows, you can subscribe to Mastering Midlife anywhere podcasts are heard, and listen on Amazon Alexa by adding this show to your flash briefing. For more resources, to find Mark's best-selling books, and to work with Mark, please visit the website at markjsilverman.com.